So I've noticed over time that there are some things that have a sort of universal applicability to them. There are some things that you can learn on one level and they seem to apply over and over and over again, just in a bunch of different situations. One of those things is the odd yet clear connection between motion and emotion beyond just sharing a root word. A long time ago, I was driving home from work and I noticed I was going 35, just steady 35, and I noticed when I was traveling at one constant speed, no matter what speed it was, I stopped feeling motion. And I became aware of motion again when I would accelerate or slow down. And obviously, the quicker I accelerated and the quicker I slowed down, the more I felt the motion. And when you're with somebody, when you meet somebody, and you start to bond, the quicker it moves and the more deeply it moves, the more you feel it, both with attraction and repulsion. And I've noticed any good relationship I've had, whether it be romantic or otherwise, but especially romantic, involved a permanent back and forth of acceleration and deceleration. But it was always sort of perpetually accelerating, but with points where it accelerated sharper. And it was those that I felt the most. And it was around that time that I realized that emotions, connections, social bonds have shapes. And as weird as that sounds, it sounds super weird, but they do. These feelings, these emotions, this similarity to motion can be almost translated into shapes. You can basically draw any relationship that you know. And one thing I've noticed too is Earth obviously is moving at one steady speed and we do not feel Earth's motion at all. You can become aware of it in certain states, but for the most part we just don't notice it. And if Earth were to speed up, we would notice it. And it's a funny thing. It really is. How it's very similar, and then there's people you meet who you feel completely ambivalent, neutral, nothing. There's no emotion. There's no repulsion. There's no attraction. It's just sort of a they exist, you exist, and there's no bond. I mean, some people, as soon as you see them, something's happening. And we say not to judge books by their covers, which I tend to agree with, but a person's appearance says something about how they are on the inside, how a person moves, how a person speaks. It says a whole lot about how they are on the inside, how they choose to present themselves. And as I got older, I became more aware of the how, not necessarily the what. Comedic timing is the how. The same person can say the exact same words, and it's not funny. And somebody else can say it, and it's hysterical. Comedic timing is a certain motion. Anger is a certain motion. Love is a certain motion. Hate, disgust, They all have directions and speeds and intensities, just like motion. And it's interesting from the point of view of some sort of universal architect, some sort of God, our relationship to that entity is exactly like our relationship to our parents and to our children. Because we want our children to love us, yes, but we don't want to love them because we have some magic ability where we snap our fingers and they love us. That sort of love and all the manifestations thereof would do nothing for us if we could just make people love us on command. The love that we received from them, it just wouldn't. It would be totally, totally different than a real love that was built based off of a relationship, off of the nature of your relationship. That sort of love is real. And the things that come of it, the acts that come of it, are felt much, much deeper. And God, for this reason, has given us a will that's free. We're free to love God or hate God, but it's based off a relationship. We want our kids to do well. We want our kids to both take our example, our image, what we teach them, and we want them to do something different of their own accord, something unique, something completely theirs. Because a human life, if you want to find meaning anywhere in this universe, you will find it where a human being is. A human being takes shade, the position between the sun and a rock, and finds relief. A human being is constantly making meaning around us. And if you could draw your senses in, if you could somehow draw your hearing in, your vision, all of your senses inward, and feel as close to objectivity as humanly possible, you suddenly become aware of what you are. And the who suddenly becomes less significant and it's just all too obvious. And people, it's pretty staggering how there's such a array of human beings who exist. You have these people who are just seemingly innocent their entire lives, completely innocent. Don't even swear, you know. Don't have an evil bone in their body. Would never do anything to harm anybody, even complete strangers. And then there's other people who literally enjoy the suffering of other people. And that shows up in society in so many different ways. And then the ones who enjoy inflicting suffering have to mimic and cloak themselves in the traits of the other person who is innocent. They basically have to wear a mask or a cloak of innocence in order to get anywhere, to get close enough to betray people. And it does seem like there is a little bit more of that because I notice the internet is a place where people have this sort of cloak of anonymity. Even though it's not fully anonymous, there's a lack of actual repercussions to the things that people say, and it allows people's shadow to just sort of walk around. And every time I see people like that, I always think, and I'm acutely aware that there is something wrong. there's something in real life, I almost know what that person would be like in real life. Because even with the cloak of anonymity on the internet, there are still people who don't use that as an opportunity to like just inflict suffering. And honestly, I commend those people. There's certain people I respect. And the relationship between men and women, um, on the whole, the overall relationship between men and women fluctuates. Obviously, it's gone through a lot of changes over the years, but I remember, I think it was around 2011, the whole pickup artist thing became popular. And a bunch of guys started to learn all these things that were supposed to be able to attract women, supposed to be able to turn them into these guys that women liked. But women found out about that. And all that's over, but women found out about it. And it's caused this serious lack of trust. Understandably so. But I don't know how many people can sense the overall trajectory, can sort of feel the overall state of, let's say, a country. I mean, maybe the world is a bit too broad, but maybe your country. I mean, can you tell? Can you feel it? What's your day-to-day experience like? What do you see when you look at the opposite gender? I think there's a massive lack of trust. I mean, it's getting better, I think, but I tend to shield myself from the overall direction of society, no matter which direction it is. I tend to remain separate. In a mob, in a crowd, I would not, I would get somewhere high and watch, if anything, or leave due to lack of interest. I can't. There's something about things that are popular or things that everybody seems to really like that I am instantly skeptical of. And I don't know why that is. You know, I think it's because through life, the things that people overwhelmingly seem to like weren't that good. Like, in my honest opinion, they just weren't. They weren't that good. And over time, I just sort of started to lose faith in the majority opinion. Um, and that's not to claim some sort of, you know, rebellious attitude. It's just the way it is. Uh, yeah. And my personal relationship with women over my life seems to have been unaffected by the direction of society. But I feel for women. I do. It must be hard to have to like navigate those waters. Same with men, to be honest. I mean, it's all treachery to a degree, but at the same time, um, there's a huge undercurrent of just of good because try as we might to be self-sustaining, independent entities, you're always going to yearn for love. You're always going to yearn for the sort of love that you know that you need. And when I say this, I know that you know what I'm talking about. Because for men, there is something that women provide that we absolutely cannot provide ourselves. And for women, there's something that men provide that you cannot provide yourselves. And the world would be a far less interesting place without women. And for women, the world would be a far less interesting place without men. It's this whole internet thing, too, because we're still dealing with the ramifications of having access to anybody, no matter the distance. So you can meet people who are obviously far beyond where you're at. So you're not just one to sort of get together with the pool around you. You can get with somebody states away, a world away, and people do. It's almost like there's more people getting left behind because of that. The competition is too much, you know? At least that's what it looks like for now. But men and women are inseparable. And there is a sort of equal waste byproduct that comes along with a terrible relationship between men and women. There's a psychic byproduct. And you can watch it shifting. You can see it. My parents are still married, and in my family, we don't have any divorces that I know of. But I don't know. My family is a bunch of smart people. They don't seem. They don't have that thing about them that that makes you look at them and think, "Man, you're dumb," or everybody is just super sharp. And yeah, I mean, you can go through life, as I said, fully immersed in the dramatics. But if you do that for a long enough time, you will age quicker. You will lose your innocence. You will become far too immersed in the activities of other people. You'll become far too immersed in the thoughts and feelings and opinions of other people. Those will be the only things that have any sort of law. I firmly believe that a human being needs periods of time of unplugging. And I think that's why people go on vacations. That's why people do all kinds of things. But you don't need to go on vacation for something like that. You can do that anytime, any place. It's purely psychological. And you have people like Freud and Carl Jung. Carl Jung was on a completely different level. He understood the shapes, the various areas of the human mind, and how the human mind and the human body are completely inseparable. Obviously, it's like we tend to think of psychological ailments, psychological conditions as purely in the brain, but it's not. The brain is this thing atop us that is plugged into our entire body through literally trillions of nerve endings. There's just string strung all through our bodies. But some people are clever. Some people, like I said, intuitively understand something, and they can bring out just the right words and say it just the right way to help you, which is strange. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I think to myself, I wonder what it would be like uh, to meet myself. I mean, I genuinely wonder that. I wonder if it would just cause the entire universe to crash. When you meet somebody and it's, let's say, a romantic situation, from the moment your eyes meet, there is something coming from you and to them that meets and just starts connecting. And with some people, I don't know if you guys experience this, with some people, it's so powerful that you cannot even control your motion. You're automatically walking up to that person because you want to see how they laugh. You want to see what they think, how they view the world. You want to see what makes them laugh. You just want to know about them. And with such people, if you fall in love, you will entwine yourselves together so much that you will become each other. You always keep the half of you that's purely you, but half of you becomes that person. You merge. And when such a situation comes to an end, the reason it's so painful is because you're losing half of yourself. And you have to physically pull these tendrils, these connections, these strings out. And they have to be arranged back together as one person without two, somehow with this whole other emotional and psychic body within you, because it's not leaving, it's just changing. The nature of a relationship today and how it goes always changes the meaning of the past. A relationship that ends makes most people feel like it was time wasted, changing the meaning of the past. If you get married, it changes the meaning of the entire relationship. And people, I've experienced this myself, when you meet somebody who you want around, you want to keep around, you can't help but simultaneously think about what it would be like if they did leave, or if there was for some reason you guys had to split. And then it causes people to take measures to prevent that, and it causes a slight behavior change. Because sometimes the things that we do to prevent something are exactly what was needed to cause it. And we don't know until later. With anything at all. When something unfolds, we don't know until later whether it's good or bad, despite how it feels. There's a story, an old Chinese story about a farmer whose son ran away, and or his horse ran away, and when it left, the whole village gathered around and said, "It's a shame that your horse ran away." And the guy said, "Maybe." So the next day, the horse shows back up with four other horses, and then the village gathers around and says, "It's a good thing that your horse ran away." And he said, "Maybe." And then the next day, while his son was training the new horses, one of the horses kicked him and broke his leg. And then the village gathered around again and said, "Well, I guess it's a bad thing that your horse ran away." And he said, "Maybe." And then the next day, the military showed up trying to recruit people for war, and they couldn't take his son because of his broken leg. And the village gathered around and said, "Well, I guess it's a good thing that your horse ran away." And he said, "Maybe." And that's how it goes. A single event fluctuates between good and bad, depending on what happens now. Losing your job is a bad thing in the moment, but when you get a job later that's much, much better, you say, "I'm glad that I lost my job back then." When a relationship ends and you end up meeting somebody else and you marry that person, you say, "I'm glad that relationship ended." That's happening all the time. So we have this amazing sense that sort of detects, it gets better and better and sharper over time, that detects generally whether events are good or bad as they happen. Like, we get good at getting a sense for the nature of events. Our interpretive device gets sharper and sharper and sharper. And sometimes we're surprised. Sometimes we find out that we were wrong. But overall, by the time we're adults, we can tell if something's good or bad. But overall, I view my interpretations and my judgments as interesting phenomena, but I don't consider it the absolute and final determination, because I know later on um, it'll be completely changed. It'll be um, a different interpretation. So interpretations aren't meant to be final. They're meant to be remembered and guided into something that turns out into something that you want. It's a strange thing, because a man who gets into a car accident, it's bad for him, but it's good for a mechanic because he literally makes money off it. So events objectively are as they are, but they're both good and bad. Everything is good for somebody and bad for somebody. And then there's shades in between, there's degrees. Just like when I said there's two genders, the obvious, there's male and female. But within that, there's a huge spectrum of masculine and feminine. There's feminine women, feminine men, men, and masculine women. A man can be 75% feminine, all the way out there, just extremely feminine, and he can do all sorts of things to doctor himself, cut off his organs, and do all these things, and get closer and closer to a woman without actually crossing the line. Because, as far as I'm aware, there is no way to cross that line. A woman, ultimately, despite all of the things we're fully aware of, is somebody who's able to grow eggs that are carriers of her DNA. She grows eggs every month and they're discarded every month. And those eggs are able to be fertilized by a male. And a male is able to provide the fertilizer and contribute half his DNA. Until you're able to make a man grow his own eggs and have those eggs fertilized by somebody else, he's not a woman. And vice versa too with a male, until you're able to create some organ that you can attach that allows somebody to contribute their DNA. That's not a man. And that's just the very, very basic. The fact that I even have to say this is a testament to the regression that's going on. The fact that this even has to be brought up. When I see people say there are only two genders, it just reminds me of how we've regressed in some ways. But that's the thing. With any set of opposites, an inhale and an exhale, there's obviously degrees of inhaling and exhaling. There's a certain amount in and a certain amount out. And your hands can move at all kinds of degrees and all kinds of directions, but your left hand will never be your right hand, and your right hand will never be your left hand. Your inhale will never be your exhale, and vice versa. But they are very close, and they can share characteristics. They can work together. They may be able to emulate each other, but they will never be each other. Negative will never be positive. They can get 99.9% of the way there, but never officially flip over. So, that's why it's important to remain aware of the objective. It's almost like snapping out of the hypnosis. It's almost like the dramatics of life are a form of hypnosis, because they pull you in. And dramatics don't require another person, but other people certainly uphold it and accelerate it. But yeah. And I can see my own shape when it comes to other people. I'm not somebody who often extends out or asks for anything or wants anything or needs anything or goes out of my way to enter people's lives. It just isn't. There are some people I find extremely interesting or attractive, and attractive as a general term, not just physically, but in every other way. And it's those people I can't help but want to know. There are some people I've spent hours and hours and hours talking to just because I like their thoughts. I like their being. I like the way they are. I like the way they exist. There are some people, I mean, it doesn't matter who they are. Uh, the most attractive woman you've ever seen, uh, maybe people who aren't so attractive, doesn't matter. There are certain people who I will never forget, and I am just bound to. And I'm the sort of person where I cannot stay surface level for too long. I always go deep. I always want to know the real you. And honestly, people are seemingly relieved to go there and to find out that it's not an effort to know them just to use that information or do anything malicious. It's simply for the interplay. It's like music, you know. You don't listen to music to get to the end, you know. It's the whole song. You're just listening to it and you like it. And people can be that way. And there's other people that I'm just repelled by. I won't have anything to do with them. And I have no shame about that. It's just the way it is. Um, and I view human beings too. I see the individual, of course, but I also see the common. In each person, I see in them the same thing that I have and the same thing that everybody else has. And on that level, we're all the same, obviously. And on another level, they're completely individual, completely unique. It's always two levels. And it's a beautiful design, this universe. It's extremely well done. And when I talk to God, I always make sure to tell him that I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he did it like this. And I thank him for my shot, you know, to wander around and explore it and figure it out. Because if I made people and I cared so much about them that I sacrificed myself for them, it makes me understand that in order to do that, you would really have to care. And it makes you wonder. During that period of time, it was during the Roman Empire. And Jesus didn't know he was God until he was like 33. The whole time, he was living his life as like a normal person. And then all of a sudden, one day, Michael comes down and tells him. And before that, like I said in the last video, the reason why humanity needed to be forgiven was because of what happened after Satan and all them came down to earth and rebelled. Not only did humanity identify with and worship these deities who became Zeus and, you know, all of the Greek gods and the whole pantheon of gods all across all kinds of different civilizations, that's who these entities are. Not only did they worship them, but they taught humanity how to make a complex civilization. They taught them language, writing, how to make shields, swords, how to raise an army. And then these angels started to procreate with humanity, and these bloodlines started coming up. That's what David and Goliath is. Goliath is like a few generations down. He was with his four brothers that were they were huge, like 12 feet tall. And they were some of the last of those bloodlines because when humanity fucked up, it got to a point on Earth when all this was going on that nothing was kept up anymore. Crop yields were terrible, and these angels had to start eating humans, and it was just famine and disease and just this terrible, terrible, terrible situation, like basically hell on earth. Which is why God had to flood this bitch. He flooded it to reset it because it had gotten so bad that it was irredeemable. And there was only one man on earth who still believed in God, who didn't identify with these deities and worship them, and that was Enoch. That's why he got to visit God. And he happens to be the grandfather of Noah. And he said when Noah was born, he lit up the room. He had this glow, and he knew that he was important somehow. And Enoch's story is fascinating. The Book of Enoch used to be part of the Christian canon, but they took it out, I think, 700 years ago. And there's all kinds of shady reasons why that happened, but I have my own theories, but I don't think you can really fully understand the Bible without the Book of Enoch. It's so incredibly important that it just changes the way you view the Bible. It turns it into a real story, and it's crazy. And to be honest, I am okay however this universe actually turns out to be. I just happen to be somebody who has seen, not only in my own studies and my own investigations, but from what I've seen from the work of other people, I see design. I can't escape it. And I came to this idea much, much later in life. I've never been to church. I read my Bible sometimes. I just randomly open it and go to a page. I'm not like a Bible thumper type. And when I was 17, I was at a party, and I was in the back talking to this girl, and she was a Christian. She was a hardcore Christian, and I made her cry with my arguments against Christianity. Like, I was already that versed in the anti-God language. And now that I'm 37, I remember what I said. And first of all, it's terrible that I made somebody cry. And second, I can rebut everything that I said at that time. Because there's more going on than one would want to reduce things into. A lot of the times I think people want to negate Christianity as a reality, or even the idea of a God who rewards and punishes at the end of your life because of what they've done, or what they want to do, or what they will do. People don't want to believe that there's a place that you go, for living an evil life. People want it to be random. But the Book of Enoch also describes heaven and hell. And it's not what I thought it was. Nothing is what I thought it was. He describes heaven. He gets a full tour, and he basically becomes the ambassador between God and Satan, the devil, and his angels. When the jig is up, he negotiates. God wanted to use a man, the one man who didn't believe in them, to tell them that there is no hope, that there is a place personally being made for you and anybody who identifies with you or your way of living. And that place was called Sheol, which is hell. And that last part's important. People who identify with your way of being. Human beings have a will that's free. After Jesus came here, he basically said, all right, this thing is yours now. Earth is yours. Do with it what you will. You can make heaven of it or hell of it, but I'm not going to intervene anymore. Because before the flood, he was intervening all the time, showing up to people, telling people this, telling people that. But not anymore. It's been ours for a while now. And humanity has done some pretty awful things with religion. It's not religion that's bad. It's what people do with it. When people realize power can be gained, people will use things to that end. But it's not religion. I'm not one to agree when people say religion's done this and religion's done that. Things have been done in the name of religion. Just like things have been done in the name of psychology. People have lobotomized and done shock therapy. And I don't blame psychology for that. I blame the people who did it. And that's what I'll always do. The next time I make one of these videos, I'm going to go in depth on one of these things. Because I don't write any of this down, I just start talking. And yeah, I think it would be advantageous to go in further detail on some of this shit.